Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video unboxing and first impressions look at the Ulefone Note 7. This is a ultra budget unlocked smartphone that sells for only 70 bucks, sometimes goes on sale for only $40, and has a teardrop notch, which looks very much similar to much more expensive flagship level smartphones. So that's probably the most impressive thing about this device is going to be its design. For the price, we have a 6.2-inch display. We also have a overall form factor, which I think is a mashup between a Xiaomi phone, the Xiaomi Note 7, another ultra budget phone with a small notch, but this one again is just a fraction of even the Xiaomi Note 7, and also a Huawei phone on the back. It looks like it has triple cameras on the rear. But I do suspect some of the lenses might be fake for the depth sensing and the monochrome sensor, for example, because again the price would just be too good for it to be true. But it does look very expensive from afar, especially this purple version even has that gradient finish that you'll find on the aforementioned Huawei or Xiaomi phones. Now it does come in 3 other colors, gold and black, so you can pick the version that you like the most. In terms of specifications though, it's definitely an entry-level phone. We're still talking about a quad-core processor from MediaTek, one of the entry-level SoCs, not a Qualcomm Snapdragon unfortunately, and it comes with 1 gig of RAM only, and that's because it's running on Android Go, which has been optimized to perform alright on lower end hardware. So for sure this is not going to be a flagship in terms of the performance. Otherwise it comes with, I believe, 16 gigabytes of built-in storage, a pretty large 3500 milliamp hour capacity battery, and a pretty stock version of Android 8.1 Oreo Go Edition. The sensor resolution on the rear is 8 megapixels, and the phone does have all the typical connectivity options, including access to Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, 3G, and 4G selected bands, and otherwise the resolution of the display is not quite as dense as on a flagship phone. In fact, I believe it's only going to be around HD+, so around 720p, and it's not going to be full HD or Quad HD. So that is one area where they were able to cut costs a little bit, even though it does have extremely thin bezels on the left, the right, and the top. Definitely one of the most beautiful looking super cheap phones. We have a micro USB cable for charging, again not USB Type-C, but definitely forgivable at this price. We also have a quick user manual / warranty card. We also have a second screen protector. There is one that's pre-installed on the phone already, so you get a second one for backup, and there's the wall charger, which is simply using standard USB. Now this isn't the first Ulefone device we've checked out. They have been around for a few years now, making lots of low-cost, budget, affordable phones, so definitely not as popular as, say, Xiaomi or Meizu, one of the more recognizable brands. They are definitely striving for value, but they haven't really disappointed me in the past. We checked out one of their other phones last year, and it was also around the same price, $60. It had an older 16:9 aspect ratio screen, so not quite as futuristic looking, but it performed pretty well for very similar specifications at the time. So hopefully this device keeps the same tradition. Now the phone again is made out of plastic, looks very glossy on the rear. We have the flash integrated with the 3 other lenses, and on the side we do have the power key, which is textured, and the volume rocker itself, which is pretty clicky. Now this phone does actually have a removable back cover, which I'll show you guys in a moment, even though it feels like a unibody. There's the micro USB and loudspeaker, and that's it. The SIM card and micro SD card slots are located underneath the cover, which again is very difficult to remove just because it latches all the way onto the sides and makes it feel just like a unibody phone. But the battery itself is actually non-user removable or replaceable. But again, that's where you pop in your SIM card and expand on the built-in storage. Top here just features the front-facing camera on the notch, and let's just peel off this protective film. Again, there is a screen protector, and boot the phone on. So we're going through the initial setup, and as aforementioned, it runs on Android Go Edition, which is a lighter version of Android that also includes versions of apps like YouTube Go, Gmail Go, which consume less data and don't require as powerful processors for it to still run, remove some of the animations and transitions. Other phones we've checked out running on this OS include the Redmi Go, just a few months back, and also sells for actually about the same price. Of course, the Xiaomi Redmi Go does have a much more traditional looking 5-inch display and design, a bit more like yesteryear's phones, whereas this has much more exciting, super thin bezels that make it look more expensive, but the actual processing power underneath is very similar to other low-cost budget Android Go phones we've seen. So you can see here that the notch is actually implemented pretty well. We have, again, very bezel-less and almost seamless experience looking at the top. The keyboard here does have haptic feedback and vibrations, so whenever you're tapping or sliding on it, it does actually kind of buzz like you're pressing down on a real button and actually feels surprisingly responsive. The screen itself is IPS LCD, by the way, and it's fully laminated, so there's no gap between the screen and the LCD like on cheaper phones in the past. So it actually looks really good even if you're pointing it, say, at the sun, and really it's just a resolution that's a little bit lower, especially across such a large display. If you look super closely, you still really won't find notices of pixelation per se, but if you're comparing it side to side with a more expensive flagship, you can definitely tell some of the differences in the resolution. Now, there is no drag up notification drawer, which is kind of surprising. So even though it's running on Android Go, it seems they've slapped a launcher on top of the platform and customized it a little bit. But anyways, again, the screen itself is pretty good in terms of viewing angles and color saturation, all look very good for an IPS LCD panel. Again, not the sharpest in the world, especially on such a large 6.2-inch display, but as a whole it does a pretty nice job. And again, on the top we can see our notifications. It's just segmented by that notch. The bottom chin is a little bit larger, but as a whole it still is very much respectable, and actually a little bit smaller even than, say, a Xiaomi Note 5 from just a year ago. So overall, it's definitely a very easy phone to hold despite having a large display. Drag down notification shade looks fairly typical with all the connectivity options, and here are the Android Go Edition apps that I talked about. Now here we can take a look at the settings, and indeed we are running on Android 8.0 Oreo, so not the latest Android 9.0 Pie, but nonetheless still relatively up to date on a low-cost device like this. Again, when the notch is not in use, it just fades into black and kind of blends into the background pretty well and makes it symmetrical on the top and also the chin on the bottom, and overall definitely a very kind of futuristic and modern looking design. Taking a quick look at the camera here, now you can see that the loading speed is definitely not as fast as, say, on a flagship, so you may miss a few moments if you are trying to capture something at a moment's notice. The user interface here has been optimized from Ulefone. There is an interesting AI button, but we have to find out more what that actually does. The interface also reminds me of maybe a Huawei phone, so they've taken some inspiration from EMUI in terms of additional settings that you can apply. So that's more or less it for our hands-on unboxing and first impressions look. Definitely a very promising budget phone. It might be good for media consumption if all you're doing is watching a few YouTube videos and browsing the web. I think it's actually going to do a pretty good job also for making phone calls and light tasks like that. It's obviously not going to hold up for extreme gaming or if you're expecting a monster for multitasking, but you do get a very modern and striking looking phone for very little cash, which has always been kind of Ulefone's strength, and more than ever, this is again the cheapest smartphone with a teardrop notch. A good backup phone, emergency phone for kids, for the elderly, and if you're just short of cash but still want something that does the essentials. So we'll be doing more testing and come out with a more complete review soon, so be sure to stay tuned for that in terms of how it stacks up for some of the other apps as we use it a bit more. But for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Ulefone Note 7 smartphone.